revived a hunt for him. Today, Aurora police investigators said they periodically...
Sit down, breakfast with Tony.
Even make it. If you make this shot, you can have anything you want for dinner.
Mother always told me, sit up straight, eat all your vegetables, and stay out of small foreign cars. But Joey, Mother never told me about Ultra Bright.
We'll tell you. Ultra Bright has...
Hello? Hello? Hey! Behind you!
Welcome back to Oddities of the Internet, a series that explores the bizarre, the unexplained, and the unsettling corners of the Internet. 5 more stories, each more peculiar than the last. Some you may have heard of, others buried in obscurity, waiting to be uncovered. Let's begin. This is Poppy the Performer, a children's show that aired in the early 2000s on a channel called Kids Station. At first glance, Poppy the Performer looks like any other early CGI kids show. It's bright, colourful, and set in a surreal world that seems designed to capture any child's imagination. The story follows Poppy, a young, energetic clown in training who wants nothing more than to master his craft and entertain the crowd. By his side is Kedamono, an anthropomorphic wolf who wears multiple masks. But more often than not, Kedamono becomes a reluctant participant in Poppy's antics. But even from the very first episode, something feels off. Because Poppy the Performer is far from innocent. What starts as simple slapstick comedy quickly escalates into something much more unsettling. Poppy's personality becomes more apparent. He's short-tempered, impulsive, and prone to violent outbursts. He routinely inflicts harm on Kedamono, and even attempting to kill him in increasingly absurd ways. But it's not just Poppy's actions that make the show disturbing, it's the way the violence is treated. There are no consequences and no lessons to be learned. There's an absence of moral structure. There's no clear hero or villain. Actions have no consequences, and pain is not only ignored, it's expected. And nothing showcases that better than the very first episode. Poppy is practicing a magic trick. He saws Kedamono into 2 halves, then reattaches him backwards. That's it. No shock, no horror, no attempt to fix the mistake, just amusement. Kedamono, on the other hand, is horrified. His body is mangled and he's visibly distressed, but it doesn't matter. His suffering is just another joke to Poppy. Kedamono then exacts revenge on Poppy using the same trick, cutting him to pieces until nothing is left. He fantasizes about his own circus routine free of Poppy, until he notices that Poppy is still alive. And not only that, but each dismembered part of Poppy has regrown into its own form. They crowd around him, reminding Kedamono that death doesn't exist here. No matter what happens, no matter how brutal or grotesque, the characters always come back. It creates an almost nihilistic tone, violence without consequence, suffering without purpose. It's a world where nothing truly matters, where no amount of pain or struggle leads to any real change. Poppy terrorizes Kedamono, and Kedamono endures. And yet, no one acknowledges it. There's no audience, no bustling crowds, no laughter, no real context for why they're performing. And the worst part is, it doesn't even feel like a joke. It's easy to write off the show's violence as slapstick comedy, similar to the likes of Tom and Jerry. But Poppy the performer doesn't treat its pain as comic relief. There's no punchline, and if death doesn't exist, neither does freedom. Poppy the performer aired for just over a year, spanning 3 seasons and 39 episodes. 2 of those episodes were banned from airing during its run. One was Knife Game, an episode centered around the infamous hand roulette, where a player stabs a knife between their fingers at increasing speeds. The episode was deemed too dangerous, as producers feared children would attempt to replicate the game, putting themselves and others at risk. But the other banned episode was far more infamous. Unlike Knife Game, this episode was aired once, and then never again. It was deemed too violent, even by Poppy the performer's standards. The 11th episode of Season 1, known as Swallower. The episode opens with Poppy licking a knife. He tosses it into the air and effortlessly swallows it without injury. He decides to push things further, pulling out a much larger sword and flings it into the air. But this time, he isn't so lucky. Kedamono tries to pull the sword out, but it's lodged too deep. He instead resorts to more extreme measures. He ties a rope around the sword's handle and hooks it to a moving truck, hoping to forcefully drag the sword out of Poppy. He writhes in pain as the ropes break, his body dragged mercilessly across the circus, colliding with sets and props, before exploding in the distance, finally removing his sword. As payback for Kedamono's actions, Poppy retaliates by swallowing him whole, keeping him inside his stomach. He tries to escape, but Poppy takes things one step further. Once more, he throws the sword into the air, intentionally swallowing it. At its core, Poppy the performer isn't just another surreal, violent kids show. It's a bleak, nihilistic loop disguised as slapstick comedy. Their pain is played for laughs in a world that doesn't care. And that might be the most unsettling thing of all, because Poppy the performer doesn't just break the rules of traditional entertainment, it throws them away entirely. It doesn't offer comfort, morality, or even logic. It simply is. There's no higher meaning to be found in the relentless suffering of Poppy and Kedamono. No overarching message about resilience, perseverance, or friendship. If anything, it suggests the opposite. That violence is inevitable, that suffering is routine, and that even in the most bizarre and exaggerated circumstances, cruelty is mundane. Poppy and Kedamono don't learn, nor do they change. They live, they die, and they come back to do it all over again. It's a comedy without a punchline, a story without meaning, just an endless, inescapable performance.
Pitson went missing, May 11, 2011. His mother unexpectedly signed him out of his kindergarten class early.
Disappearance cases are often disturbing in their own right. But some leave behind a lingering absence, an unshakable emptiness that feels like it was never meant to be filled. And few cases encapsulate that feeling quite like Timothy Pitson, a 6-year-old boy, a family trip with his mother. And then, nothing. No answers, no remains, and no confirmed sightings. Just a child who walked out of class and was never seen again. It begins on May 11th, 2011 in Aurora, Illinois. Timothy Pitson's father drops him off at Greenman Elementary School just like any other morning. But less than an hour later, his mother, Amy Fry Pitson, shows up unannounced. She walks into the school, tells the staff there's a family emergency, and signs Timothy out of class. Except, there is no emergency. While James is at work, Amy and Timothy leave the school together, walking back home before getting into the car and driving off. Their destination, a zoo in Brookfield, Illinois. Somewhere along the way, Amy's car breaks down. The car is then dropped off at an auto repair shop near the zoo, and the mechanic is kind enough to drive the pair the rest of the way. Meanwhile, since it was a half day at school, Timothy Pitson's father returned to the elementary school to pick Timothy up around 10:30 that morning, only to find that his son was already gone. He tries to call Amy multiple times, to no response. Desperate for answers, he calls Amy's sister Cara, asking if she'd heard from Amy, and she replied, "I'm sure she's fine. If you've been fighting with her, give her some time to cool off." Jim then contacts the police, filing Timothy as a missing person, but since it had been less than 24 hours and Timothy was accompanied by his mother, the case was not considered urgent. But as the hours passed and Amy still hadn't responded, that feeling of confusion started to turn into something else. By now, school is over. A normal mother would take her son home, but Amy doesn't do that. Instead, she drives Timothy even farther away, this time heading north to the Key Lime Cove Resort in Gurnee. Again, nothing seems off. Timothy is just a kid on vacation. They spend the night there, checking out the next morning at 10 a.m. And instead of going home, Amy drives even farther. This time, they head to the Kalahari Resort in Wisconsin, where they spend the entire day at a water park. To anyone watching, it looks like a normal mother-son getaway. And this is the last time Timothy Pitson is seen alive. By May 13, Amy's little vacation had started making its way through the family, and she realizes that a lot of people are now trying to get a hold of her. Phone records show that around 1 p.m, she called her mother, her brother-in-law, and the police, informing them,
"Timothy's safe. He's not in any danger."
Her phone pings in Sterling, Illinois, about 100 miles from home, where Amy then speaks to Charles. He urges her to come home, to bring Timothy back where they knew he was safe. But Amy becomes blunt and defensive.
"1. Don't you trust me? I'm not gonna hurt myself. I'm not going to hurt Tim."
And then she said something even more disturbing.
"Timothy is mine. I'll do with him what I want."
At 7:25 p.m. that evening, surveillance footage captured Amy at a Family Dollar store in Winnebago, Illinois. She was alone. She bought a pen, paper, and envelopes. At 11:15 p.m., she checks into the Rockford Inn, alone. Amy Fry Pitson was dead. Her body was found collapsed in front of the bathroom mirror. Behind her, the bathtub was filled with blood, the result of deep gashes on her forearms. But she hadn't waited for the tub to take effect. Instead, she had stood at the mirror and cut her own throat. She had bled out, alone in that room, sometime during the night. But Timothy was nowhere to be found. Police searched every inch of the room. There were no toys, no clothes, no personal belongings, nothing to suggest that he had ever been there at all. Except for one thing, a child-sized matching t-shirt, a comfort item for Amy in her final moments. And next to it, a note that should have explained everything. But instead, it only made things worse. "I'm sorry, and I know this will be hard on you, but in time, you'll get over it and you'll move on. I just don't feel like I've belonged in the world, and I felt for a long time that I belonged with Timothy. But in the end, that wasn't enough."
Well, some people leave notes and some don't. I couldn't decide, so this is my version. Tim is somewhere safe with people who love him and will take care of him. You will never find him. To whomever finds me, sorry about the mess.
Hello, Hamilton County. It's Campbell. I got some information I need to pass on. It's a little confusing, actually. I don't know if you have a supervisor you may speak to or not. It's about a missing child, possible abduction case. Okay. So we had this child who said he ran away. He said he was kidnapped. And we found it. It looks like back in 2011 he was kidnapped or abducted. I'm not quite sure what the situation is. I'll let you guys Google it and decipher from your own information there. I didn't hear anybody say anything. The last name is Pitson, Pitzen. First name is Timothy. If you Google it, it'll just pop right up.
A potential break in the case.
They've been in contact with investigators.
Today, 7 years after the disappearance of Timothy.
Breaking news that might provide a stunning update.
He is Pitson. He claimed he was being held at a motel and had escaped his captors and ran across a bridge.
Out of nowhere, a 911 call comes in. A boy, around 14 years old, begins to speak. He's frantic, telling officers that he had just escaped from 2 kidnappers and that his name is Timothy Pitson. Authorities rush him to Cincinnati Children's Hospital for immediate care and questioning. He tells police that for the last 7 years, he had been held captive and trafficked, that he had finally gotten away. Then, investigators sit down with the boy and begin their test questions, including details that were never released to the public. One of them is simple. Did you have any pets? The boy said no. The boy is not Timothy Pitson. He's Brian Reaney, a 23-year-old convict recently released on parole for burglary and vandalism. Brian was mentally unwell, diagnosed with Asperger's, bipolar disorder, ADHD, and more. He had seen Timothy's case on the news, became obsessed with it, and convinced himself that he was Timothy Pitson. Brian Reaney was charged with aggravated identity theft, sentenced to 2 years in prison, and later released into his father's custody. Another false lead, another dead end. To this day, no one knows what really happened to Timothy Pitson. Was Amy telling the truth? Or was it something much worse? Until new evidence surfaces, Timothy's fate remains one of the most disturbing cases in recent history. But Timothy's story is just one of many. Across the world, countless names and faces have vanished. Some never identified, others forgotten entirely. Some faces stay on posters for years, becoming nothing more than part of the background. Others are so distorted by time and crude reconstruction that they no longer resemble the people they were meant to help find. For decades, forensic artists did what they could. These images were meant to bring them home, to remind someone, somewhere, that they had once been known. And yet, so often, they failed. Not because people weren't looking, but because the faces meant to identify them looked nothing like them. Today we're going to look at some of these cases, the Janes and John Does, some who were finally identified, and others who are still missing to this day. And we'll see just how much of a difference a real face makes. It began with a discovery no one was prepared for. A pair of suitcases abandoned in a ditch, but inside was something far worse than they could have imagined. 2 women, folded, lifeless, and stuffed inside. One of them was quickly identified as 37-year-old Laura Simonson. The other was a mystery. All that remained of her was a decomposed body and a set of basic identifiers. No ID, no phone, and no fingerprints on file. Just a body and a skull. Forensic artists got to work creating a facial approximation, hoping someone would recognize her. It didn't capture her essence. It didn't feel like a real person. Not quite human, not quite helpful. And for a while, it seemed that way. Until someone recognized her. Despite the uncanny valley of the rendering, there was something about it that prompted friends and family in Oregon to come forward. They believed it might be Jenny Garmes, a 19-year-old woman who had disappeared in 2012. Dental records later confirmed it, and after years of silence, Jenny had finally been found. She was described by those who knew her as soft-spoken, someone who just wanted to be loved. She'd met a man online, someone older who had said all the right things. That man was Stephen Zellick. A former police officer, Zellick admitted to meeting both Jenny and Laura online. He lured them into what he described as consensual relationships that ended in death. Both women were killed, their bodies hidden in his apartment for months, before being sealed in suitcases and dumped off the side of the road. Zellick eventually pleaded guilty to reckless homicide, but no sentence would return the years Jenny lost. And unfortunately, Jenny's case was not unique. Across the country, countless Jane and John Does sit in cold storage, their identities buried beneath crude sculptures and sketches that look nothing like them. And that's what happened in Kane County. For 26 years, he was nothing but bones, discovered in a shallow grave in Kane County, Illinois. This man had no identification and no clear cause of death. Investigators were left with little to go on. In 2005, forensic artists attempted to give him a face. The result was a wide-eyed sculpture with an unnatural stare and a face that looked more like a mannequin than a real person. And for decades, it got him nowhere. Then in 2019, technology finally caught up with the case. With the use of modern DNA analysis, forensic investigators were able to extract a profile from his remains. They compared it to the genealogical database, searching for relatives, people who might have been looking for him all along. And after 26 years of being lost, Kane County John Doe finally had a name. He was last seen in Aurora, Illinois, but for reasons unknown, he was never reported missing. His family had no idea that all this time he'd been lying identified in a morgue just miles away. His remains showed no signs of violent trauma, no gunshot wounds, no broken bones. Authorities never ruled out foul play, but after so much time, the cause of death remains undetermined. His loved ones never got those answers, but at the very least, they got him back. Yet many others weren't so lucky. Ina Jane Doe, also known as Susan Lund. On Christmas Eve, 1992, Susan Hope Lund walked out of her Clarksville, Tennessee home and vanished. She was 25 years old, a mother of 3 young children, and according to her husband, she had left for a walk and never returned. At first it seems like she had simply disappeared into thin air. There were no obvious signs of struggle, no witnesses who saw anything suspicious, and no evidence to suggest the worst. The days stretched into weeks, and then into months. Christmas passed, then the New Year. Her family waited for answers, but none ever came. Susan remained a missing person for 3 decades. Her case sat cold until in 2022, 30 years later, she was found, or rather, part of her was. 3 months after Susan had disappeared, nearly 240 miles away across state lines, a human head had been discovered. It was found on the side of Highway 37 in Monroe County, Indiana. It was collected and catalogued as an unidentified Jane Doe. Without any DNA testing back then, authorities had little hope of identifying the remains. They had no choice but to rely on an artist's interpretation of what she could have looked like, based on the only piece of evidence they had. Her face was uncanny, not quite human, not quite real. Instead of bringing her home, the reconstruction only served to distance her further from recognition. Her image was circulated in missing person databases, yet no one recognized her, because no one knew this woman. And so Susan existed as Ina Jane Doe for nearly 30 years, reduced to nothing but an eerie, misshapen replica of herself. It wasn't until 2022, thanks to modern forensic testing, that authorities finally matched the skull's DNA to Susan Lund. After all those years, she had been sitting in storage, waiting to be recognized. Her children, left in the dark for so long, had grown up believing she had abandoned them. Her husband never lived to learn the truth, never knowing that she had been taken, not that she had left. Found only for a moment, and then, just like that, she was gone again. Across decades, the faces of the missing are misremembered, distorted by crude reconstructions that failed them. But forensic technology has come a long way. DNA testing and modern composites have helped solve cases once thought impossible. Even still, For every Jane and John Doe who finds their name again, countless others remain lost. And with each passing year, their faces grow harder to recognize. Wasteland, a place of familiarity for many. Over a decade of exploration, thousands of hours spent wandering its sun-scorched highways and desolate ruins. Players have seen it all. Every hidden vault, every unmarked location, every obscure encounter buried in the game. Along the way, most players come to find that the boundaries of New Vegas are surrounded by rock, towering cliffs and jagged ridges, an impassable barrier stretching across the edges of the map. It's a clear and deliberate design choice. You're not meant to go beyond. The world has limits, and those limits are easy to see. Except for one. In the far southwest corner of the map lies the Mojave Outpost. Perched along the edge of civilization, it serves as a border checkpoint, a last remnant of order before the vast, empty desert takes over. For most, it's a safe haven, a place to rest, resupply, and prepare before heading deeper into the wasteland. But beyond the Mojave Outpost, the world ends. Beyond it, there's nothing. Just empty, unreachable desert. At least, that's how it's supposed to be. However, on August 14th, 2023, someone found a way out. By exploiting a glitch, a user by the name Dr. Bosch slipped past the Mojave Outpost's locked gate and ventured into the unknown. The world is bare, empty, just as you'd expect for an area that players were never meant to see. There's no ambient life, no scattered debris, no signs that anyone or anything was ever meant to be here. Until Bosch discovers something strange. A statue far beyond the boundaries of the map. It doesn't move or react. It doesn't do anything at all. And yet the fact that it exists is deeply unnerving. Statues aren't uncommon in New Vegas, but this one isn't part of any known structure. It has no connection to any quest. It's just there. Bosch continues exploring deep into the night, the barren landscape stretching endlessly in all directions. The world feels different out here, and as he wanders further, he starts to find buildings. Normally, you'd think nothing of this kind of thing. It's just window dressing, the kind of low-detail scenery placed at a distance to make the Mojave feel larger than it really is. But in one house, far beyond where any player would ever see from inside the map, there are signs of life. A table set with food and drink, not just scattered, but placed deliberately. And nearby, a campfire burns its last embers, and on the nearby bench is a lunchbox. Dr. Bosch, like any other sane player, decides that things are too unnerving and turns back to the Mojave Outpost. But when he arrives, it all feels a little too quiet. He tries to scale the nearby rock wall, just like before, but the glitch no longer works. Fast travel is disabled, and the radios are now only static. The only thing remaining is the marker. Along the way, a new radio station begins to play. Though it's nothing more than static mixed with sounds from various sound bites and noise. What looks to be antennas populate the area along the way, and before long, the location of the marker comes into view. A shack. It's inhabited, or at least it was. Bosch loots the area, finding a functioning camera, as well as several black box recordings, 3 of which are images, with the latter being an audio recording. At first, it's military chatter, soldiers communicating over radio static. But then, in the middle of the transmission, a strange sound plays and the chatter goes dead. It's the constant presence of the unknown that creates this lingering unease, the sense that something much larger is happening just beyond the screen. Bosch has stumbled onto something he was never meant to find, and now he's knee-deep in a mystery of eldritch proportions. A computer filled with technological gibberish. Hidden areas provide answers to questions that were never asked. The deeper he goes, the stranger it all becomes. And things turn stranger by the second. The road ends, and there, in front of him, is a chasm that stretches deeper than you can see. And something is waiting inside. Darkness stretches all around, except for a small living space. And nearby, carved into the earth, is a hole. The road leads deeper than anyone could have imagined. A cave filled with oddities and unexplained mutilations. No rhyme or reason to the events that came before, only questions on top of questions, leading Bosch further down the rabbit hole. And at the end of it all, a casino, long abandoned past its prime, the identities of its patrons now unknown. Bosch wanders through the halls, finding blocked entrances and remnants of life around every corner. He eventually finds a door downstairs, locked with a missing key. Bosch opens the command menu, hoping to unlock the door using a cheat, but even then, he is still denied access. However, a nearby door remains unlocked, leading Bosch into an industrial area where he finds exactly what he was looking for. The hallway is oppressively dark, several bathrooms lining the walls. But one room is different, blocked off by a gurney. A corpse lies on the table, and it becomes increasingly clear that Bosch is no longer alone. But this is where we leave it. Dr. Bosch's tale beyond the Mojave is long, complex, and incredibly compelling. There is still more than half of the story yet to uncover, and if we were to tackle the entire thing, we'd be here all night. If you're a fan of Fallout or ARGs with incredibly deep mysteries, I highly encourage you to watch Dr. Bosch's videos for yourself. The journey we've seen so far is only just the beginning, and it wouldn't feel right to rush through the entire story when there is so much to spare still to unravel. I'll leave a link to the series in the description to view in your own time. But for now, let's let's move on. It was the night before New Year's Eve in the year 2000. The streets of Setagaya, Tokyo, were silent. Most of the homes in the neighborhood were already abandoned, left vacant due to an upcoming park expansion. Only a handful of families remained, and by the end of the night, that number would shrink by one. Because sometime between the late hours of December 30th and the early morning of December 31st, someone entered the Miyazawa family home. And by sunrise, all four of them were dead. Six-year-old Ray was attacked first, strangled to death in his bed. Mikio, the father, had heard the commotion and ran upstairs. Mikio had managed to injure him during a confrontation until he was stabbed in the head with the killer's sashimi knife, where a portion of the blade broke off. The killer then found Yasuko and Nina. They were stabbed repeatedly with a santoku knife found in the house. It was an absolutely horrific crime. But what makes this case truly disturbing is what happened next. Because the killer didn't leave. Instead, he made himself at home for the next 2 to 10 hours. He raided the fridge, eating ice cream and leftover melon. He left his feces in the toilet without flushing. He fixed his wounds with a nearby first aid, then sat down at the family computer, logging in around 1:18 a.m. after the murders had already been committed. And bizarrely, the only sites that were visited were ones bookmarked in the family's browser, as well as the father's work website. He spent hours inside the home, surrounded by the bodies he had just murdered. And then, at some point, he was gone. Police arrived the next day, finding a crime scene that was both brutal and completely careless. The killer's fingerprints could be found all over the house. His blood was mixed in with the victim's. His clothes were sitting in a pile on the floor. The knife he had used still in the sink. There should have been more than enough evidence to find the murderer. It should have been an open and shut case. From the killer's shirt, investigators traced it back to a limited production run. Only 130 units had ever been made and sold. His hip bag, left behind at the scene, contained trace amounts of sand. Sand only found in the Nevada desert, more specifically, Edwards Air Force Base. The incredible amount of fingerprints and DNA left at the scene were run through every database available, and yet there was no match. Whoever he was, he had no prior criminal record, no government files, no trace on him in any system, anywhere. But the DNA testing did reveal a few things. The killer was male. His maternal DNA traced back to a European mother. His paternal DNA was East Asian, meaning that the person responsible for brutally murdering a Japanese family in the middle of Tokyo wasn't Japanese at all. And yet, despite the efforts of over 246,000 investigators, despite collecting over 12,546 pieces of evidence, despite a 20 million yen reward for any information leading to an arrest, More than 2 decades later, the murderer has never been caught. Maybe one day, the Setagaya killer will finally be found. But until that day comes, he's still out there, watching, waiting, knowing that no one has ever come close to finding him.